Throughout history, our nation has called on men and women to go to foreign lands in defense of our way of life. Many come back with physical and mental scars, the result of terrible experiences in distant battlefields. Others gave their lives in defense of freedom. Irwin Stovroff is one who survived. He enlisted to serve with the U.S. Army Air Corps, where he was trained as a bombardier, and with the rank of lieutenant, was assigned to fly in a B24 bomber to fight Nazi Germany in Europe during World War II.
For me, it was the only place, and it was the only thing I wanted to do, to not being just patriotic, but my responsibility to my country and to my family, to everybody. It was our responsibility to share in this war, which unfortunately we do not do anymore.
Irwin remembers how it was back then, flying bombing missions in the Passion Pit, his B24 Liberator. He was based in London, a member of the 8th Air Force, the unit that suffered the highest casualty rates during the war. During a visit to a B-24 bomber, like the one he flew over Europe, Irwin talks about his experiences in the war.
This plane was an outstanding plane. Took a great bomb load, had a good airspeed. I was lucky enough that I did get almost completed 35 missions. I was the bombardier on this plane, and my position was right here. And what you're looking at right here is probably the greatest view that anybody had in the airplane, because I had a full frontage view, and I could also see through the sides. And what you're looking at inside here is the Norden bomb site. And this was a gyro-described bomb site. It was the first time that we ever had anything that could be so-called precision bombing. They look like these are 500-pound bombs that we got that are strapped in at this point. When you went into combat, the bombs had pins in them. And as you began to approach your target, the pins would be pulled, okay, making the bombs live. So were we really afraid, most of us? No. However, I had one experience that really and truly I was afraid after that. And that was, we were on a bombing mission to Peenemünde, and that is where they were manufacturing the buzz bombs. And these were the bombs that Germans created specifically for killing civilians, because those bombs were headed for London. And on our mission, we were going to see if we could destroy that plant that was doing it. And it was there that something happened that I had never seen before. I was sitting in my position getting ready for our bomb run, and there was a squadron in front of us that had 15 planes. That's 150 men. And out of nowhere came planes with no props, no propellers. I'd never seen that before. I didn't know what it was. And they were the first jets. And in a matter of seconds, they blew every single one of those 15 planes out of the sky. There was 150 men, all completely killed. And when I saw that, I said to myself, oh, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And I also thought, when I get back home, I'm going to see, maybe I've done enough missions. Maybe they'll just understand that I'm shook up. And they did understand, and they sent me to London for 3 or 4 days, our old crew. And of course, after 3 or 4 days in London, we came back to fly again. But I had never seen anything like that. And it was just frightening. But being young and knowing what we had to do, we went back and we flew more missions.
At this time, the attrition rate was very high, and those air crews who were still alive were being asked to increase the number of missions they had to execute before being sent back home.
Actually, when we were getting close to 30 missions, they said to us, we're gonna not force you to fly 35, but we need you. We absolutely need you at this point. We've lost some planes. The replacements haven't come in as fast. We'll tell you this much. If they come in faster, you won't have to fly the 35. Well, unfortunately, they didn't come in. So by the time we reached our 35th mission, our bags are packed. We're all set. We're going, baby. We're on our trip. We're going to be back home. It's a short trip. They're not sending me into Germany. And when we get back, we're all going to have a healthy drink, and we're going to be on our way back home. And there we are, going to be flying around selling war bonds or whatever the hell it was, but we're not going to be in combat anymore.
What Irwin didn't know was the dramatic turn of events he was about to experience.
And on my 35th final mission, it was final, I was shot down. I was shot down over France. We were, on our final mission, they gave us a short mission over the channel, and we were going into the Falaise Gap, which was part of Normandy and near the city of Caen. And we were going to drop our bombs 3 times. We were at 3 different targets, which were the bridges, were the way out for the German troops in the front line. We were going to blow up all their bridges so they couldn't get out. And I never got to the first bridge because we got hit, but flak and our number 1 and number 2 engine were on fire. Immediately, hydraulic system failed. Everything was bad, and we all had to bail out because the plane was going to blow up.
After all these years, Irwin has kept a picture of his plane going down, taken by a crew member of another bomber.
I dropped the bombs right through the doors. I just let them go. I pulled out my .45, and the only thing I ever would able to hit with my gun would be something close up. So I shot the Normandy bomb site, which we were told to do.
He was trained to destroy the bomb site before bailing out, to protect the new technology from the Germans.
I got a hold of my parachute. It was right. You always keep it right next to you. You know, that's the important thing. And I put it on, and I turned, and in the front of the plane, of our plane, was the nose wheel. And the wheel is up, and all you have to do is touch those doors, and they'll open up. And I just dove right through the doors. I think my nose gunner went out first. I followed him, and then the navigator followed me. And those are the 3 of us that went out through the nose wheel. And the balance of the crew went out through the bomb bay doors. They were already torn off when I toggled the bombs out. And you count to 10, which is a long time when you've never done this before. And then all of a sudden your little pilot chute opens up, which is small, and you look up there, and then the big chute opens up, and then you feel, oh, I've got a chance now. And I remember playing around with a little bit with it, and it looked like it started to swing up the other way, and I thought, oh, I'm going to go over the side of the chute. So I never touched it again. I just let myself come down, sort of try to guide myself. I didn't want to go in the channel, because that's where we were, right close to the channel. And as we were coming down, they were shooting at us. And they didn't get me, but as soon as I landed, I hit a fence, and I got out of my chute, wrapped it up as fast as I could, and they were coming for me because we were right there. And I threw my dog tags away because I'm Jewish. And you know, they had H or Hebrew and P for Protestant, C for Catholic, but they did that for, I don't know. But anyways, they did. And I knew that with an H on my tag, I'd really be in deep trouble. So I threw my dog tags away. And by that time, they had surrounded me, and put up my hands, and I surrendered.
Irwin was 21 when he was captured by the Germans and taken to a farm to be hidden from Allied fighter planes that were constantly attacking the German troops.
But after a couple of days at night, they moved us. And they took us into Paris. And after being in Paris for a day or two, which was my first and most unpleasant trip to Paris, they took us into Germany, and we went to a place called Dulag Luft. It's outside of Frankfurt, a town called Wetzlar. And they put you in solitary confinement.
What Lieutenant Stovroff was about to experience was out of the pages of a World War II spy novel. But his situation facing the German interrogator was very real.
But they thought we knew everything. So they would ask you all these questions and you would say name, rank, and serial number, because basically, honestly, that's all we really knew. After my third interrogation, this German officer, speaking perfect English, I mean absolutely perfect, said to me, Lieutenant, he said, I've listened to you and you're not going to tell me anything, so I'm going to tell you all about you. And I'm looking at him, and he said, you were born in Buffalo, New York. You named my father, my mother, my brother, my sister, told me what my brother was doing, named the grammar school I went to, named the high school I went to, named a girl that I had been dating before I left for the Air Corps. And I'm sitting there looking at him, and I said, I just don't know. He says, you see, I know what you are. And I knew he meant that I was Jewish. And he said, now let me tell you how I know so much about you. You lived on Claremont Avenue in Buffalo, New York. My parents lived on Ashland Avenue in Buffalo, New York, which was the next street over, and you were their newspaper boy. Now, how about a coincidence? He said to me, I wish you would tell me more. He said, because I really can help you. He said, you're not telling me anything. And I said, well, there's nothing I can tell you. I said, it's not even military. I only can give you my name, rank, and serial number. I don't have any other information. He said, okay, that was it. He said, well, I'll try to help you. And what he actually did was he put a question mark under at my religion. And you can see it on my records that we got from the Germans after the war. There was a question mark, but later on there's a great big J-U-D-E written across it because they knew who I was. From there, we were put in boxcars, locked into boxcars, and 40 and 8 was supposed to be the size of these boxcars. I don't know how many they jammed in. We were all over one another, and we went on our way into Germany, deeper into Germany, and then stopped at night in marshalling yards, and they would park us there with no identification on the roof of the train, which is against the Geneva Convention. They were supposed to know it because otherwise the British and American fighter pilots were shooting up all the trains. And a lot of guys got killed in those trains. Or they'd leave us in the marshalling yards where the British were bombing at night. So by the time you got to your prison camp, you felt, whoo, I made it. It's hard to believe, but you could say, oh, this is going to be easy from now on. At least I got here.
Irwin's situation was to get worse at Stalag Luft I, the concentration camp in Germany where hundreds of American and British airmen were kept in deplorable conditions. The tide had completely turned against Germany, and the changes would bring dangerous consequences for some prisoners of war like Lieutenant Stovroff.
But in my case, it changed in February of '45 when Hitler decided that all Jews were to be killed. Not that they weren't trying to kill them all, but any Jew that they had any place at all was to be killed, including American officers, American regular enlisted men, all of them. Anybody who was Jew was to die. And that's when I had my first feelings that I might not make it home, because in our camp we were segregated.
The conditions in the camp were terrible, and one more time, Irwin was facing the reality of dying in Europe. The Germans were hardly feeding the POWs, and any boxes with food sent by the International Red Cross was being kept in warehouses away from the prisoners. But again, fate intervened on his behalf, and he was to be spared. Life had other plans for him in the years to come.
During that period of segregation, it was a you weren't sure. Well, that was the one time we were unsure. And then we suddenly realized that something was happening. And sure enough, the Russians had broke through, and they were really screaming coming through into Germany. Well, we were up on, near the Baltic Sea, so there was no reason for any big major part of the Russian army to come where we were. The Cossacks came to liberate us. And in they came, honestly, just like you'd see in the movies, on horseback with the belts of bullets across their chest, swords, on horseback, killing anything that they could see.
After being liberated, all prisoners had to find their way back from Germany to the American and British lines. Their commanding officers made arrangements to have the men transported back to their bases.
And they did, and finally after, I guess the war was over maybe a month, and they made a deal within 24 hours. They flew in stripped down B-17s, and these planes taxied down, never really stopped, and you'd run like hell and jump on the plane and off you went.
After surviving the war against many odds, Irwin was awarded the Air Medal with Clusters, the Purple Heart, and the Distinguished Flying Cross. And years later, the French government decorated him with the French Legion of Honor. Once in civilian life, he enrolled at the University of Illinois. 1 year after graduation, he got married and started working in the furniture business, where later, he became vice president of international sales for a large company, traveling all over the world. After a successful career, Irwin wasn't ready to slow down, and he volunteered to help process compensation claims for POWs at the VA hospital in West Palm Beach, Florida. Eventually, he became service officer for prisoners of war, helping another officer clear hundreds of claims for POWs and their widows.
Most people said they didn't understand why I was doing it when I didn't have to, and I just said, I want to do it. And the more I did it, the more I liked it, and the more marvelous people I met. I've met some unbelievable heroes who were prisoners of war. I could tell you stories that are, the men are so remarkable, what they lived through, not me, they.
Besides being a service officer, Irwin works at the VA hospital along with his service dogs, Cash and Jenny. He enjoys sharing the love of his dogs with other veterans.
He's a trained companion dog. He is very well behaved, and he has been trained to be nothing but friendly to veterans.
Oh boy, that's a good deal.
Yep.
That's a good dog. Yeah. My dog's about that size.
That's the little one here. Her name is Jenny. Jenny, I sort of trained her, but the big guy was trained professionally.
What kind of dog is this?
She is a little corgi.
Also very, very good, very calm.
Very gentle, just like him.
Here's her angel.
You're Irwin. George, this is Cash, and this is Jenny, the little one.
Oh my goodness. Oh, you big boy. Oh my goodness. Look at this. Yes, a good dog, a good dog. Yes,
He has an idea you like him.
Lieutenant Colonel Kathy Champion served in the U.S. Army all over the world with distinction and was highly decorated.
I joined the military in 1982. I was enlisted at that time. I served for 27 and a half years. And during that time period, I became an officer, and I had the pleasures of traveling to foreign countries. When I was in Iraq, I contracted a virus that I was not aware of because I was treating the local Iraqis with minor medical issues. And when I returned to the United States, I was doing fine, but within a year's time, the virus had started to attack my spinal cord and my vision.
After being treated for 3 months for the wrong disease in a Florida hospital, she lost her eyesight completely.
They could not figure out why one day I could see, the next day I couldn't see, and it all stemmed back to the virus in my system. So I became a hermit of my own house. I quit school, I quit my job, I quit being social. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to tell anybody what was wrong or what was really happening to me. I stopped calling my daughter, I stopped calling my son. My family began to, say, well, why aren't you returning our phone calls? So it's like, I'll just stay in my house, I'll just stay in my space. And it caused a lot of financial drain on me because I wasn't able to work, and I wasn't able to reach out to the community because I didn't want other soldiers to know that I was broken. I was a combat commander of a special forces unit, and there's a certain stigma that comes with that in the military, and I still carried that stigma with me.
One day, a couple of friends convinced Kathy to get out of the house, and on the way to the beach, they saw a sign from Southeastern Guide Dogs advertising an open house for the visually impaired. Her friends immediately suggested she should go and get information about getting a guide dog.
When we got to Venice Beach, they were all talking about how excited they were, and I could have my freedom back and I wouldn't have to rely on anybody, and I just sulked. I sat at the beach and sulked, and I love the beach, I love the water, and I was mad that they felt that I was so hurt that I needed some other thing to help me be whole again.
Chad Deppner is a Navy electronic technician, first class, a recipient of the Navy Achievement Medal. He served for 16 years with the U.S. Army, National Guard, and U.S. Navy, who he now works for in Washington, D.C. After being deployed overseas for a year, working in a bomb disposal unit, his life changed when he came home. His wife Connie noticed the changes first.
Well, I first noticed, I think, that there was a problem, or just that something was different with him right after he came back from Iraq this last time. And looking back on it, I really think that there was a problem or some changes before he ever got back. And then after he got back, he didn't ever want to go out with friends. That he really liked these friends, but he never wanted to go do anything. Didn't want to so much as go deal with the grocery store. And then it kind of got to a point where at home, even though we didn't spend any time around other people, he was even not interacting with me. I mean, it was almost a couple of years of being ignored, and you don't know where that comes from. So that was pretty hard. I mean, he would spend most of his time playing a computer game because that would, be kind of an escape for him from everything.
After I'd noticed that I was having problems with anger issues, just outbursts over the slightest provocations. I was having issues at work, I was having issues at home, and finally decided I needed to get help, and that's when I was diagnosed with PTSD. Initially, I was given some medications for depression and anxiety, and I didn't like taking those. It didn't really seem to help, and the side effects that I was having seemed to make things worse. I just wanted to stay at home more and more. There's less energy. The weight gain contributed to, furthering the depression, and just didn't seem to be going the direction I was wanting it to go.
It seems like every new doctor you talk to just wants to cram prescriptions down your throat, and that's not the solution. You have to figure out what's causing something. I just kept pushing him to push them, and he finally got connected with the right doctors, I guess, that look at things in a more complete view rather than, okay, here's a pill for this, here's a pill for this. And so after not too long of being in some therapy sessions with some really good doctors, he finally started kind of breaking out of that and being himself again. But the day that they brought Laura Lee, the service dog, in for that session, that day alone was like a switch. He sent me pictures from his iPhone of her and was just all excited about this dog and actually smiling about things, and it was awesome.
And so I began researching it further. And that's where I came across the Southeastern Guide Dogs Pause for Patriots program.
Master Sergeant Mark Guatme is a proud Marine who has served our nation for 21 years in Europe, Africa, Haiti, and the Middle East. His last deployment was in Iraq, where he served 3 tours in a combat unit.
Did I see combat in Fallujah? Yes, I did. At the time, I was a gunny in the Marine Corps.
The many years of service in grueling combat situations, exposed to mortars and improvised explosive devices, left him with symptoms he never had before.
I noticed it strongly, it would be 2004. I had just come back off of a patrol and went to evening chow with my fellow comrades, and we basically, we're standing around after chow in our little bivouac area or berthing area, and the next thing you know, I wake up on the ground and I have 3 combat surgeons standing over me, and my head corpsman. That's my first major sign of what was going on, because I didn't know where I was, didn't know who I was, and I had a horrendous headache and all that stuff.
The highly decorated Marine was flown to Ramstadt, Germany for a series of medical tests.
At this point, they didn't know what was wrong, what was going on. It was basically, a big giant question mark. They're like, there's physically nothing wrong with you. We don't know what's going on. So I had the option to go back to the States for further medical evaluation, or to go back to my unit. I chose to go back to my unit, and when I got back, I stayed there. I was one of the last ones to leave Iraq from my unit. I felt obligated to make up and stay an additional month because I was in Germany while my fellow Marines were fighting the fight.
Completely focused on his work, Sergeant Guatme didn't know how much his life was about to change. His wife, Carolyn, remembers those terrible months.
January 2006, I got a phone call. I was TDY to Florida. I got a phone call from his first sergeant saying that they were driving him home. And they had taken him to the clinic at Quantico and thought that he'd had an anxiety attack. Little did we know at that time that anxiety attack was probably his first real seizure that we know about. Could have been a seizure in 2004 that he had that got him medevaced out of Iraq. We don't know. From January 2006 until present day, we've been dealing with a very serious seizure disorder. There were times there where he would have seizures for 5-6 hours a day. Everything from petites to grand mals. We would take him to the hospital and they couldn't get him to stop having seizures.
As time passed, Mark's health continued to deteriorate, despite all the efforts from him and his wife to find the right combination of medications and therapy to get him better.
There were times where he couldn't walk, he couldn't talk, he didn't know who he was, he didn't know who I was. Of course, we took this all very serious. We were doing everything we could to get him better, and he just kept getting worse. We got several diagnoses. We got post-traumatic stress, we got seizure disorder, reflex sympathetic dystrophy for his nerve pain in his feet. We got nerve damage. The list of diagnoses went on and on. Unfortunately, we had a neurologist that did not want to take what was going on with him seriously. Unfortunately, I had to start writing some letters and start ringing some bells and say, hey, my husband's not getting taken care of. We're not getting better. Something else needs to be done. I ended up writing the Commandant of the Marine Corps. basically begging him to help. You know, my husband needs help, he's your Marine, let's take care of him. And we were, from that point on, we were assigned a case manager. He was transferred out of Walter Reed, transferred over to Bethesda. Got a wonderful case manager who was just like, you know, just an old school nurse, and she was a bulldog. And within a couple months, we got him a traumatic brain injury workup and found out that he did have a traumatic brain injury on top of the post-traumatic stress. So the big thing with that was the treatment for post-traumatic stress was actually enhancing his symptoms of the brain injury. Because some of the pills, you know, they slow down your thinking, they do this. Well, he already had that problem, so it was just making it worse.
Mark and his wife looked outside the military healthcare system, searching for the right kind of treatment, including the possibility of getting him a service dog.
Drugs weren't helping. As a matter of fact, too many drugs. That's a big issue. We just hand another pill out and cover up the problem and don't try to fix the problem.
I was at the pain management, and I saw a flyer on the bulletin board about service dogs. She had mentioned to me because she had read a book about service dogs.
Did some research, found out that a dog can cost anywhere from $30,000 to $70,000. Sometimes the waiting list would be 2 years up to 7 years. And I said, well, we definitely don't have the money. And I certainly don't have 7 years to wait to get my husband better.
In the meantime in Florida, Irwin Stovroff continues his work on behalf of the veterans. One day, an official from the hospital told him something that would challenge him to move in a different direction to help other veterans.
In December of '06, I was at a meeting in the director's office at the West Palm Beach VA hospital, and it was brought to my attention that our government does not have funds for these young men coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. I couldn't believe it when I heard it. And they just said, well, there is no appropriation for them. And the only way a young veteran is going to get a dog if he's blind, or get a dog if he's lost his limbs, is through private donations. And then they were waiting maybe a year, maybe a year and a half. Can you imagine? The kid's blind, served his government, and he's sitting there, has to wait a year to get a dog when he should have it when he needs it. So I said, I'm going to do something about this. So they said, good, we need somebody here. We'll help you from the VA.
One more time, Irwin rose to the occasion to help his fellow veterans. With the help of wealthy friends, he began a nonprofit organization called Vets Helping Heroes. Irwin's efforts were paying off. The media began to notice his fundraising activities. Magazine, newspaper, and TV interviews followed. His foundation, Vets Helping Heroes, became associated with 2 dog training organizations, one in New York and one in Florida. Southeastern Guide Dogs in Palmetto, Florida, has been training dogs for the blind for over 25 years. With the increasing number of veterans needing assistance dogs, they have a program called Paws for Patriots, designed to train dogs to assist our veterans.
Now, our program is called A Gift for Life. And it's called A Gift for Life because to train a dog, to fully train a dog for basically things that are almost unbelievable what they can do, is $50,000. However, we call this a gift to life, which means the veteran pays nothing for this dog, absolutely nothing. When the dog is with him for a period of maybe 8 or 9 years, that dog has now been working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. He never leaves his side. He's always with him. He should be retired. And the dog is retired.
When the dog retires, the veteran receives another dog for free. So far, Vets Helping Heroes has placed dozens of highly trained dogs with veterans in need, and the list of vets applying for assistance grows.
The first applicants we started off with, there was around 22 or 23. So it begins to tell you that the results of this war is not known yet, the final result. You know, there's over 40,000 men were wounded, and 10% of them are serious. And all you have to do is go to Walter Reed, you can see what the results are.
The cost of training a service dog includes breeding, puppy raising, training, veterinary care, and room and board for the veterans as they train together with the dogs at the campus.
There are three things that are the nucleus of what a dog can do for a veteran. Number one, he's going to get mobility. Number two, he's going to get independence. Number three, he's going to get companionship and love. And those three things can take him from ready to commit suicide to becoming a regular citizen again. This is what's so important about this program.
Southeastern Guide Dogs has a selective breeding process for golden and Labrador retrievers. Then they go through a selection process to get the best dogs. After some initial training of the dogs selected, the veterans approved for the program are interviewed to determine their needs, personality, and home environment to be able to select the right dog for him or her.
The training for a dog is approximately 2 years. The dog will go to what we call a puppy walker, and that's a private home. People volunteer to take our puppies, 8 weeks or 10 weeks old. They take them home with them, or we send them there, put a little jacket on them, and that dog now is eligible through his training to go anywhere. And what we're really doing is acclimating the dog to a store, the streets, people, anything that you would normally do with a regular dog. That's what the dog is learning with these people. And then after approximately 10, 11 months, something in that, the dog comes back to us. And then we start our real training as to what that dog, the trainers analyze the dog and they know what the dog is really ready to do. And in many cases, he's not ready. I think our graduation rate is somewhere between 60 to 65%.
The part that made me begin to think that I needed a guide dog was that I was depending so much on my friends to do the little things for me. I'm an athletic person. I've always been an athletic person, and I wanted to be athletic again. And I'd have to call somebody to come and do some activities with me. And then they weren't always there for me, and I got frustrated. I got irritated that, you know, come on, you know, I'm the blind person. And I did use that card sometimes, which is really pathetic, but it was like, you know, what about me kind of syndrome. And spending more time by myself made me begin to think, well, you know, why not have a dog?
She was told they had a dog for her a couple months after she applied.
I was extremely nervous when I first met my guide dog. I was sitting in a chair, rocking back and forth because the anxiety had already built up so high that I just wanted her to love me. And when she came into the room and she came up to me, she was all excited and she was butt tucking and she was licking, not licking me, she was just doing the things that dogs do, and she rolled over and let me pet her belly and everything, and she was like all happy. And the rest of that day, it was like, I have a dog. The 26 days on campus with the training, the first week is by far the most stressful for I think all of the participants. Those of us especially that are first time dog users, because you are learning to adapt to the dog too, because the dogs are already trained, they're very well trained.
After learning about the program Paws for Patriots, offered by Southeastern Guide Dogs, Chad applied and was approved to receive a dog named Chansey. For the last 26 days, he's been training and bonding with his new partner, And now, he's getting ready to fly home to Virginia.
I feel very good about the partnership between myself and the dog. I noticed yesterday while we were doing our training together, we visited some places which normally cause a fairly high amount of anxiety for me. And in those situations, my anxiety levels were reduced. During my flight home, Chansey will actually ride on the plane with me, and she will sit on the floor between my feet where you normally place your bags. By having Chansey with me on the aircraft, that will help with the anxiety of being confined and being so near other people that tends to cause anxiety.
Mark's wife's concern with the cost and time it would take to get a service dog was answered when they applied to get one from a training facility in Smithtown, New York. With funds provided by Irwin's organization, Mark was approved to receive a dog.
We had to get 2 of his doctors to confirm that he did have a medical condition that the dog could be useful for.
When I got him, it was bonding time, just like letting him smell me, letting him be around me and everything. But automatically, it was like, even when I had him off leash, he'd follow me around. And they were amazed on how quick he bonded with me in that behalf.
Larry had been trained to do many things to help Mark, and one of them was to alert him of an impending seizure. But they didn't know how long it would take for the dog to develop that sensibility toward him.
It was like our 7th day of training and everything. I was, watching TV, and I was leaning back in the lazy boy recliner, and he was asleep at my feet. And he, out of dead sleep, just got up and started whining at me. Just stared right at me and started whining. And, Cece asked me if I was okay, and I'm like, I feel fine. I just got a small headache, and I feel tingly, and she's like, well, why don't you just go lay down in the bed and I'll get you when dinner's ready. So we went there. I went to the bedroom, and next thing you know, I wake up with Larry on top of me, barking.
So we had Larry a nice little bed made beside our bed. And so I got Mark into bed because, we didn't know if he was going to have a seizure or not, but Larry was acting strangely. So we got Mark settled into bed, and I was getting Larry settled on his bed, and he kept mouthing my hand. And I'm like, well, that's not normal. He's never done that before. He's new. I don't know. And I turned around, and Mark was actually having a seizure. So he went up, got on the bed, and alerted like he had been trained to do. About 30 minutes later, the seizure ended, so I went back to check the stove and get back to dinner. Mark was still in bed. Usually he would sleep for another hour or 2 after a seizure because they're just so draining. And as I was cooking dinner, Larry came down the hallway, and he started whimpering at me again. I'm like, yeah, buddy, I know. It's all good. And because at the time, he's so new, we don't know, does he need to go potty? Does he want to be fed? It's all really new. And he just sat by my feet, and he whined again, really incessantly whined. So I went back to the bedroom, and Mark was getting ready to have another seizure. Within like maybe 3 or 4 minutes, he was having another seizure. Larry jumped up on the bed, did his beautiful bark that he does. And from that day on, Larry has alerted or warned us before seizures. I can't recall a seizure that Mark's had where Larry did not let us know beforehand. And if you've not been around somebody that has seizures, or if it's not become your life, you have no idea how amazing that is. There were times where Mark was falling down, hitting concrete on his head. He was in the house, and he'd fall and he'd hit his head on the coffee table. He would get his head lodged between doors, and just you name it.
In the meantime, the work of Vets Helping Heroes continues. Irwin is determined to expand the exposure of his nonprofit organization to reach more donors.
Now, let's you and I have a very serious conversation.
all right? We'll have a very serious conversation on why I need you and why you need me, okay? That's better. So we understand one another, you're very important, and you have to be a good dog, and you are all the time, okay? And you are great, great help, because everybody likes to see you, okay? And that's the important thing.
After Kathy came home with Angel, she was supposed to spend 8 weeks by her side to bond and become a team.
We ended up going to the Grand Canyon together, and she was like a great people magnet because no matter where I sat in the canyon, somebody wanted to talk about Angel and why I had her, and then I could talk about my cause, which is helping wounded warriors reintegrate back into society. My life has been changed immensely by Angel. She has granted me back the life that I felt like was taken away from me because of my war injuries. But for me, it was going back to me, the outdoors, energetic, motivated kind of person, always positive.
This proud warrior has regained her confidence. Her love for the outdoors has motivated her to seek new goals of independence.
When I'm not feeling well, Angel will come up and lay next to me and just wait for me to say something. Angel is more than a member of my family. She is my partner for life. And I realize that in 4 years, for me, I have to have another partner to become a member with, but she will always be my first. It's kind of like your first love. Angel will always be like my first love, and she has taught me to trust in 4 legs, and that in itself is a humongous accomplishment for me. I would have to say to the veterans that are wounded and have come back and feel like they're in a nutshell and that nobody cares, there are a lot of people that care, and taking the time to look for good, solid organizations that want to help you, take a chance and ask for help.
A few weeks later, after finishing his training, Chad and his wife relax at home in Virginia, enjoying the company of their new service dog.
I've had Chansey for about 3 weeks now, and starting at about 2 weeks, I noticed that if I was having a nightmare, she was, even at that point, starting to wake me up. One night, about the same time Connie reached over to wake me up, Chansey had nosed up on the bed and was licking my hand, trying to get my attention at the same time. And another thing that I've noticed, previously I used to take a lot of sleeping pills to go to sleep and stay asleep. And since I've had Chansey, I haven't taken any sleeping pills at all.
As soon as, I mean, literally the day he brought Chansey home, it was like, oh my gosh, Chad's back.
Since I've gotten Chansey, things at work, of course everybody's interested in her, and of course anytime there's a dog at work, then people take notice. So after I explain why she's there and what she does for me, then people have been very accepting about that. As far as outside of work, my daily life, I think has improved considerably. I'm getting out a lot more. Mm-hmm. We're doing things. I'm not just sitting at home alone. There's been many times where I'd wanted to do things before, but just couldn't seem to drag myself out. And anymore, that's not the issue. I've even come to look forward to doing things, going out, just even if it's to drive around, or I've even been to the mall a couple of times, which is unusual for me. So it's definitely been an improvement.
I think that Chad getting Chansey has been a life-changing event. When we first got married, that was right about the time that he got back from Iraq and started having the issues with PTSD that we didn't know was PTSD. And it took a good 4 years to figure out what was going on. And over all that time, there's just been a lot of confusion in what's going on and what has been causing things, and I think we both got pretty depressed because it just, you know, nothing made a lot of sense. But getting Chansey and just pulling him out of that and getting him back to be himself, it really has changed everything.
The reason we got Larry was for the seizures and stability, because at the time he was walking with 2 canes, so stability, Larry would help him walk. We didn't know how much Larry was going to help with the post-traumatic stress. Larry would wake him up from nightmares. Larry would guard his back while we were out in a restaurant. You know, he just all of a sudden felt comfortable enough to go on living life. And I think what Larry did is Larry brought hope. He brought hope to me and Mark, especially Mark, to get up and get on with life. And I've said it more than once, I credit Larry with not only giving Mark back his life, but with saving Mark's life. There was several times that I've had the guns removed from our house, I've had the knives removed from our house. I never knew what day I was going to come home, but I was pretty sure I was going to come home and he'd have killed himself because it was so dark and it was so miserable for him. And as much as I loved him, as much as our family loved him, as much support as we all gave him, it wasn't enough. And it's not a failing on our part, it just wasn't enough. And Larry gave him that. Larry gave him whatever humans couldn't. And I credit with Larry with having him by my side.
Oh, that's a good boy. I try to open up the door, as in with Larry, he helps me in feeling much more secure and out and about. I don't like to go anywhere without him now. I mean, I'll go to the hardware store real quick and everything. But it's hard for me to leave him at home.
I would tell any veteran that there's hope. And that hope sometimes comes on 4 legs. And regardless of whether you're an amputee, you're a burn victim, or you're like Mark and you have invisible wounds of war, there's always hope. One of the things that brought Larry to us is all the wonderful people that donate to the nonprofit organization, particularly Irwin Stovroff, who is one of the most amazing men I've ever met in my life. I came home and I read Irwin's World War II story, and I belatedly realized that I had been in the presence of a very great man and a living legend. This is a man that survived World War II. He survived getting his plane shot down. He survived being Jewish in a POW German camp. I mean, this man has a story to tell like nobody else. And I think in instances like that, you can take your life and you can dwell on all the horrible things that happened to you, or you can turn it around and say, I survived. Life is good. Let me see what I can do for others. And I think Irwin has dedicated himself to future veterans that followed him. And without him, I don't know how many veterans would be Larry-less. You know, my theory is everybody needs a Larry. Every veteran, as a matter of fact, every American needs a dog to make life better.
Leave us blessed with every breath that cost you arms and legs and death. You did the job you knew was right, and silently you cry at night for bodies maimed and comrades lost, for sights beyond our furthest thoughts, for what you've lived and felt and seen, for what the cost of freedom means. Before you go, we need to show that in your side
preservation of